Welcome back to another episode of Bassin with Captain Lou. Today's episode is going to be all about this guy right here, the deep diving crankbait. That's right. Can you guys imagine? I have never done a video on a deep diving crankbait, but let me tell you, over the last few trips, about 2 weeks ago or so, this deep diving crankbait was the only thing that was catching me fish. Stick around because I'm going to talk to you guys about how I fish the deep diving crankbait. So the deep diving crankbait, I can't believe I haven't done a video on this, and the reason why I haven't done a video on it is because I haven't fished a deep diving crankbait in a very long time. Like I mentioned on my previous 2 videos in regards to thinking outside the box, the deep diving crankbait was one of those techniques that was way on the bottom of my list of techniques. I just didn't get around for throwing it. I just didn't get a feel for it. For whatever the excuse, I did not throw the deep diving crankbait up until recently. Now, you guys know the deep diving crankbait is not a new lure. It's been around for ages. However, it's a highly effective lure to be throwing out here in the Everglades, believe it or not. On the particular outing that I'm talking about, again, it was one of those slow days, another cold front situation, also dark, cloudy, windy, everything. Fish were just not cooperating whatsoever. I knew the fish were there, but similar to the jig, I said, you know what? Let me throw this deep diving crankbait. Let me see if I'm able to get these fish to react to something along the bottom. And the reason why the deep diving crankbait is such a great bait to be throwing, it's because it is one of the best imitators of bait fish we have down here. I mean, this one has like the warmouth perch type of color, and trust me, we have a lot of warmouth perch, and bass love to eat warmouth perch. So when you put this sucker down in the right depth range, and you start reeling that sucker in, and all of a sudden you just start feeling hitting the bottom, and all of a sudden it stops cold in its tracks. That's because a deep diving crankbait got you a fish. So in regards to the deep diving crankbait, crankbaits come in different sizes, and they also dive down in different depths. So the bigger ones with these big old lips right here, these are what we call the deep diving crankbaits. This guy goes more than 16 feet deep. And then you have smaller crankbaits, like your medium size to your much smaller crankbait, and they come up a little bit higher on the water column. But the main job of the crankbait is that you get down into the proper depth. And let me tell you, when you figure out at what depth these bass are holding on, and you start ripping a crankbait through there, the hits are just unbelievable. Now, when it comes to a deep diving crankbait, you got to make sure that you have the proper equipment. In this particular case, I actually have a rod that specializes in a crankbait. In this case, I have a Dobbins 735 crankbait rod. And what does that mean? What does that mean is the blank is a little bit different than your traditional type of rods, okay? It has a little bit more of a parabolic effect to it. And what do I mean by that? Meaning it's designed for treble baits or moving baits, meaning when a bass or a peacock bass hits one of these moving baits, okay, the rod absorbs that impact, and then it absorbs it to the point where you're able to keep the fish pinned. If you don't fish these lures with the proper rod, what's going to happen is that you're going to find yourself that you're going to pull the hooks out of the fish's mouth because you're fishing with a rod that's too stiff. So like I mentioned, in this particular case, this is a Dobbins 735 crankbait rod. It's actually a glass rod, so the components of this rod is a little bit different, and like I mentioned earlier, it has a parabolic effect, and you'll watch in this shot that once a bass takes it, it absorbs the entire impact of that rod, but the backbone of the rod is in this particular area, and the rest of the rod is just keeping that fish stuck. Now, 2 other things that you got to keep in mind other than having the proper rod is you also want to make sure that you have the proper reel and that you have the proper line. In this particular case, what I'm fishing is I'm fishing a Lew's bead spool bait casting reel. It's a bigger type of reel. It holds a lot of line. It happens to be a 7-speed, and I'm fishing it with monofilament, and I'm fishing it with 12-pound monofilament to be specific. And the reason why I'm going with 12-pound is because the diameter of the monofilament of a 12-pound is so thin that it helps get this crankbait to its ideal depth very quickly, because the thin line gives off very little drag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you guys through basically how I fish my crankbait. And like I said, I got my setup ready. I go ahead and I just launch it. I launch that crankbait as far as I could possibly throw it. And then once that crankbait hits the water, I go ahead and I start cranking really fast, because I want that crankbait to dive down and hit its proper depth as quickly as possible, because I want to keep it in the strike zone as long as I possibly can. And that's where that thin line comes in, that 12-pound line comes in, because I'm able to go ahead and go down the water column very quickly and then work the bottom. And then as you're reeling, you're going to feel, if you start slowing down, you're going to start feeling that the crankbait starts ticking along the bottom. It's going to tick, 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 tick. Sometimes it'll give you a hard tick. And what that means basically is when you feel a hard tick, what it is that it's deflecting. It's deflecting off of something down on the bottom, a big rock, a piece of timber, or whatever the case may be, and you're gonna feel that deflection on the rod and on your line. When you feel that deflection, what I like doing is I like to pause for a second, and what happens is the crankbait will just suspend itself for a second, and it'll break off, and then it'll float momentarily. Sometimes, or a lot of the times, believe it or not, when it does that, when it hits something and it deflects, that's when a lot of your bites are gonna happen. And let me explain a crankbait bite. A crankbait bite is a little bit different. Sometimes you may feel the bass hit that crankbait as the crankbait is moving. That's the obvious. It's like you feel your rod load up all of a sudden, and then you got your bass on. But a deflection bite's a little bit different. A deflection bite, the crankbait will deflect off a piece of structure, and when you go resume to crank again, all of a sudden you're just gonna feel you're gonna feel something different. And what that basically means is the fish took it. You're gonna have to go ahead and you're gonna have to swivel those hips, drag those treble hooks across that fish's mouth, and start reeling, because that fish is on. Now, another thing I mentioned are the different sizes of crankbaits. If you choose to fish a different size of crankbait, let's say smaller crankbaits, then you're gonna have to go ahead and change the type of rod. You may have to come down a power in regards to the rod, okay? Because you don't want to overpower the crankbait by using too much of a heavy rod. So if you're fishing a smaller crankbait, you may want to fish like into a 3 series or a 4 series type of rod, a 4 power or a 3 power parabolic crankbait rod, and that's going to help offset the risk of you pulling the hooks off a fish's mouth by using too strong of a rod. So there you guys have it, just a very short video in regards to crankbait fishing here in the Everglades. Hopefully you guys learned something. I know I talked very quick and I offered a lot of information, but like this video, share this video, better yet subscribe and become part of the community. We are growing. If you guys want to take a fishing trip out here with me, go to bassingwithcaptainlou.com, book a trip, and let's have a good time fishing. And in the meantime, you want to check out my last 2 videos, go ahead and click up there to check them out. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Take care of yourselves.